So, a question that has been gnawing at me since seeing the last trailer for The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is what happened to Zelda. Not just about her disappearance, but her lack of faith in Link this time around.
But Link, I am not sure you'll be able to stop him.
Yet in Breath of the Wild, for example, when she was tasked to hold off Calamity Ganon for over 100 years, as she waited for Link to fully recover from the Shrine of Resurrection, she never lost faith that Link would one day save her and defeat Calamity Ganon. And this was even said by herself to Link.
I always thought, no, I always believed that you would find a way to defeat Ganon. I never lost faith in you over these many years.
Yet now, in Tears of the Kingdom, she doesn't seem to believe that Link will be able to stop Ganon. So what on Hylia's green earth happened to her to lose faith like this? We see her in the first teaser accompanying Link underground when they first discover Ganondorf's corpse. And this will most likely be what happens early on in the game before they split up. As when they discover Ganondorf's body, something clearly goes wrong. And because of it, it causes the sunken ruins and where they found his body to break away, forcing Link and Zelda to split up as Zelda falls below with Link unable to catch her. And Link is then most likely caught by that mysterious hand as it saves him from falling. This is then where Zelda ends up next to Ganondorf's body before it reanimates itself. So what happens to Zelda from there? With Link no longer by her side, she's left alone against Ganondorf's return. Well, here is one theory that may seem pretty out there, but I think it's worth exploring. And that is that Zelda is killed. Now I know, most of you are out here thinking that Zelda may be playable, and I'm coming at you saying Zelda is dead, but please hear me out here. So, when Zelda was holding off Calamity Ganon for over 100 years, she never lost faith in Link. And this was after she lost her entire kingdom, including her father, the 4 champions of Hyrule, and had Link on the brink of death as well, before having to wait another 100 years to then be saved. Yet she still believed that Link would be there. So something beyond the death of her father, its kingdom, and the 4 champions had to take place for her to now lose faith. But what worse could have gone wrong for her to now lose faith when she had lost almost everything beforehand and was still able to remain faithful? Well, the only explanation is that I believe that this is where Zelda meets her own fate, as Ganon may have killed her once gaining access to his body, getting revenge for having been sealed for thousands of years and taking out one of the Triforce wielders. And that disembodied voice we hear speak to Link warning him may be Zelda's spirit, similar to how the late King of Hyrule and the champions were able to speak to Link even after dying 100 years prior. But I'm sure this theory raises a lot of questions, like for example how Ganon has captured Zelda in the past but never killed her. He usually kept her waiting for Link to appear to then attempt to extract all 3 parts of the Triforce for himself, or used her body as a puppet to work against Link. So this would seem out of character for Ganon, but at this point do we expect Ganon to retain any of his old characteristics? As Calamity Ganon is a great example of how he's willing to destroy anything in his path. No longer does he have reason, he's just become completely destructive. Of course, this would cause problems to Hyrule's legend and its prophecy, but I believe this is the game where Nintendo is trying to break away from that mold. As outside of it killing off the character the franchise is named after, it would also stop Zelda's lineage from continuing. As we know, Zelda's mother had passed away when Zelda was still really young, putting Hyrule's responsibilities on her at such a young age. But before this current incarnation of Zelda could even pass away, she would also have to have a daughter of her own to pass down her bloodline and have that be the next reincarnation of her. It's a really weird concept when you think about it, but if Zelda didn't have a chance to pass down her bloodline, that would probably be the end of the goddess's mortal incarnations. And that may explain why Ganon wanted to kill her as soon as possible, to put an end to Hylia's mortal reincarnations for good. While we do see in what seems to be Link reuniting with a pale woman that seems to be Zelda, this could be Zelda's spirit inhabiting a different form. As let's not forget, she is the spirit of the Goddess Hylia after all. And there's no way that she planned to forever be trapped as a mortal. Maybe this is where Zelda has to awaken as more than just a princess, and go back to her original role and form. Especially since this Zelda never got a chance to pass down her bloodline like the previous incarnations. And this was her only resort, as there would never be another princess passed down from her bloodline. Way back in Skyward Sword's events, her reasoning for becoming immortal was because the wounds demise inflicted on her were almost fatal for even being a goddess. So her only way of survival was to reincarnate herself as a mortal to stay alive. But after tens of thousands of years of this cycle repeating itself, she may have found a way to finally recover back to her original form. And having the threat of Ganondorf end her bloodline for good forced her to do so. Because while back then that was her best option, there was still a huge flaw in it, as being mortal doesn't guarantee you'll live to pass your bloodline to the next. And with Zelda at the risk of breaking that cycle, as she would have died then and there, she had to resort into ending this legend entirely and finding a way to go back to her original form as a goddess. As clearly throughout Hyrule's thousands of years, the prophecy of history repeating itself seems to be slowly breaking. Either Ganon over the thousands of years of history repeating itself has wizened up and is breaking that cycle, or the legend she had prophesied is unable to repeat itself for this long. Because let's be honest, throughout Breath of the Wild's time, Hyrule has never had a worse chance against Ganon's return. And not hating on our hero Link, but throughout Breath of the Wild and now Tears of the Kingdom, Link hasn't been pulling his weight like the previous incarnations of him. With almost dying and letting Hyrule crumble, to then have to wait 100 years for his help. Of course, this theory would completely change the Legend of Zelda for good, but Nintendo has kind of already done that with the direction they took Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. From the Sheikah to the Zonai, all sources that have been influencing Hyrule's recent history, and it seems that it will only continue to change. This could be the end of Hyrule's prophecy, of the constant repeated legend of Hyrule's chosen hero and its princess. Presumably putting an end to all of that, along with Ganondorf and him plaguing Hyrule for eternity. And think about it, for 37 years the series has continued to follow the same thing again and again, with Link and Zelda saving Hyrule from Ganon. But with how Nintendo has slowly been breaking away from Zelda's old conventions with Breath of the Wild, maybe they will also break away from its repeating story and finally move on from it all, letting the series take a step in a new direction, instead of repeating the same cycle again and again with Ganondorf returning and having to stop him. And it does seem weird with how Breath of the Wild's main villain was already Ganon, yet in the sequel we have more of him. So if the game just ends up with us sealing him again, it wouldn't really seem that impactful. If they're really gonna give us 2 games that have Ganon as the main villain, then by the end of it, we should finally defeat him once and for all, letting the series finally move on from this repeated cycle and moving on to something new. And clearly Nintendo isn't afraid to break away from the series, as they've already done it with its gameplay. So maybe now it's time to also break away from its story. Of course, I know this theory is completely bizarre, but again, what else could have happened to her that made her lose faith this time around? While in Breath of the Wild, she had lost everything, including her loved ones and almost losing Link. Yet she was still able to keep her faith in Link for over 100 years. Clearly something extremely bad has happened, and the only thing that I can imagine topping losing everything you have is losing yourself. Because her sudden shift in no longer believing Link must mean only the worst thing possible has happened to her. And that most likely is her breaking the cycle that has went on for thousands of years, changing Hyrule's fate forever. So maybe this is when the entire series will break away from its mold and actually put an end to it all, giving the option of the series now getting new villains and stories to take place in Hyrule's future, rather than the endless cycle repeating itself. Of course, this is just a theory. I don't really believe Nintendo will take such a huge step like this with the series, as this may just be a bit too deep and dark for Nintendo to consider. But Aonuma did state that this game would be the darkest in the series, so if they were to do this with any game, this would be the one. And clearly he didn't mean visually, as this game takes place in the sky, so he could have meant it through the story taking such a dark shift. And personally, I wouldn't be against that if that ended up being the case. Though, what do you guys think? If you don't think Zelda dies, what reason do you think is behind why she lost her faith this time around? Please let me know in the comments. Also leave a like if you enjoyed the video to help show your support. I got tons more videos coming out real soon following the release of Tears of the Kingdom, so make sure you're subscribed not to miss out. As always, thank you all so much for watching. I've been ZM, and I'll see you all in the next one.